Hi everyone, welcome to the Match+Book series on the EBPL podcast. I'm Paul. I am the Adult Services Librarian here at the library, and I manage our Match+Book form, which can be accessed through our website. Basically, you submit a list of reading preferences for things you'd like to read, genres, fiction, nonfiction, anything like that, and I will respond to it. So this idea is to take that and put it into an audio fashion so that you could also receive these list of recommendations. We're going to be touching on a number of topics, probably cover 2 per episode, and what I want to do is take it in a lot of different directions. The first question comes from someone who says they'd like to receive books about the tech industry, specifically biographies of people who became successful in the tech industry or made a career change to enter the tech industry. My first recommendation on this is a book called Uncanny Valley by Anna Wiener. It's a memoir of her time in tech industry. She worked in publishing for a bit and then moved from New York City to Silicon Valley. So I guess that's how she came up with the title Uncanny Valley. It's part memoir, but also part breakdown of the tech industry through her eyes. It's about her time working her way up through the corporate world and her interactions with people from all different major social networks, software companies, and about how people with the best intentions sometimes produce some of the worst work. What she digs at is how humanity is really the underlying factor in all of this, and how even with good intentions, they can still produce things that can have a detrimental effect to society. So things like financial chicanery, managerial manipulation, technological hysteria, things like that, especially in the startup world, where things are so chaotic and the mood seems to change from day to day. She does a great job of putting her own personal experiences forward and letting you understand how she experienced it to show that it's not all good, it wasn't all bad. This isn't a total takedown of the industry. It was about how misguided corporate culture can be on a major scale and how that mirrors her understanding of humanity and how when you get too many people together, too many ideas, the conflict is inevitable. She discusses working as a moderator of a software engineering company and how they had a team of 4 moderators for millions of pieces of software that were being generated, and how the corporate structures seemed to not understand why that was an issue. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for things like this. It doesn't seem unique to Silicon Valley, but I think that's kind of her point, is that this is everywhere. It's widespread. And there's no such thing as an ideal outcome in the corporate world. I wanted to mention another book called The Mastermind by Evan Ratliff. It is also about the tech industry, but in a way that is so dissimilar from Uncanny Valley. It involves a programmer working a normal programming job and how he went from that to running one of the largest prescription drug networks in the world. And this goes in so many different directions, involving how the DEA played a cat and mouse game, trying to hunt him all over the world, how there was investigative work from journalists, from people, every conceivable agency trying to track him down, to his own manipulation of his staff, who at times were often some of his closest family members as well. And then the betrayals from inside the organization and how they utilized that to eventually catch him. It's fascinating and terrifying at the same time. It's a real page turner, and it just goes in so many unpredictable directions. I often hear people talk about works that are stranger than fiction and how they like that kind of nonfiction book, that if you read that in a fiction book, it would seem so outlandish that this can't possibly be true. And you really get that vibe from this kind of book. The storytelling is excellent. The reporting is out of this world. He interviews so many people connected to this in so many different ways. It gets so intense that at times you will fear for the author's life, because he is putting himself in these situations where he's so within this criminal organization, trying to navigate how it works and interviewing these people while they're still working for this operation. So it's not the classic Silicon Valley biography that you'd expect, but it is so fascinating that I would really recommend it as an excellent read that touches on the industry in ways that I think are really pertinent to how it is expanding, how it's flourishing in the modern world. Our next matchbook question centers on self-help books. I don't particularly read too many. I don't know if you do, but the user wants a self-help book that isn't condescending, which I think is fair because a lot of them seem to pander, and I totally understand wanting something that seems a little bit more research-based, a little bit more practical. My first suggestion would be Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a behavioral psychologist who won the 2002 Nobel Prize for Economics. It isn't technically a self-help book in some ways. It centers a lot on business, economics, psychology, but in these ways, it also mentions our thoughts, behavior, and biases. The basic structure of the book, what he has labeled the two systems of thought that we have. System 1 is fast, intuitive, often an emotional response. System 2 is more analytical, slower, methodical, and he tries to dig at why we often rely on System 1, even though we tend to understand that it's wrong. It often leads to making foolish, overconfident decisions when we shouldn't be overconfident. It provides a framework for how we can better understand our own line of thinking and how we could analyze this and reflect on this to produce a better outcome for ourselves, to cast aside these cognitive illusions and better understand our own intentions. Another book I wanted to mention is Range by David Epstein. It's also not technically a self-help book, but in some ways it is. It examines the most successful athletes, artists, musicians, inventors, people from all walks of life, and he tries to draw some type of similarities between these disparate fields. And what he concludes is that it's not always advantageous to specialize in one specific field. It's often better to be a generalist, to have range. And in this way, we learn how to approach situations from more creative aspects and how to gain interest in a number of different fields because there's an interplay between these interests that allows us to excel further on down the road. It's not just about going from point A to point B. It's about gaining a number of different skills that will propel us to success further on down the road. In this way, he's asking us to practice so many different things and to have confidence in branching out of our comfort zone and feeling free to fail at things that we might not otherwise have tried in the first place. And I think it makes it a self-help book by really emboldening the reader to try all of these different things that life has to offer. There's so much to be gained from a wide range of experiences, and I think that alone is an important thing to consider. It also encourages us to nurture gifts that might be latent, that we might otherwise not even know are there, and would never have been able to bring out from ourselves. So I would definitely give that one a shot. Another book, now, the point of this is to match you with books that you think are going to be good, but also I wanted to mention one that is very popular in the self-help genre, but I think is very detrimental. So I wanted to mention it for that very reason. It's by Angela Duckworth, and I think this book embodies a lot of what is wrong with the self-help market in how it teaches people that if they just follow the prescribed way of doing things in the book, that it will inevitably lead to success, that there's no obstacles that they cannot conquer if they follow these secrets within this book. So I think this book is emblematic of a lot of what is wrong. I'll give an example from the book. She talks about a waitress who rolled up her sleeves, worked hard, every restaurant she worked at, promoted, and now runs a Fortune 500 company. That is an incredibly unlikely scenario, and for every person like that, there's hundreds of thousands of people who don't end up in this scenario. It is such an unlikely example of something that will actually happen to somebody in real life. I would avoid this sort of book, even though it was on the New York Times bestsellers list. But I think she's presenting her research in a way that is intellectually dishonest, and this by the bootstrap mentality is not going to actually help people, which the whole point is to improve people's lives. but this book provides a pipe dream for that. So those are all I had for now. Next time, I will have more recommendations on a variety of topics and genres. You can listen to the EBPL podcast at Anchor FM/EBP Library or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you to Melissa Hosick, who is our editor and programming librarian. Thanks again.